Hello, Internet. Nid Lois here, otherwise known as Holden Hacker. And this series I am introducing is called the Crazy Person Podcast. Now, I'm in college, I'm a junior, and one of my projects that's going to continue throughout my college career is a podcast for my college's radio station. And I figured, why not release my podcast episodes on YouTube while releasing them on the college radio station? Because I find the content of my and the idea of having a podcast cool as shit. So I decided to create a conspiracy theory podcast. And um, with this podcast, it'll range from talking about mysterious hijacking, such as this episode one is doing regarding DB Cooper, or aliens, or like Michael J. Fox is the last victim of a serial killer. And no, I am not joking. That is a potential conspiracy theory that I will cover in the future. But I thought I would also let you guys know that sometimes how conspiracy theories and the stories that are in tandem with them are often um, like, I don't know the word off the top of my head, but basically embellished. Sometimes I'll embellish it to make it more interesting. And I know that that might turn some people off, but I thought I would just let you know now, because why not have a little fun covering conspiracy theories? I mean, telling an outlandish story that will just let it dig deeper in your head, if you will. One last thing is, this is my first episode that I recorded all the way back in September/October, and I fucked it up because I stupidly compressed it when I needed to send it to the person to put it on the college radio, who puts my podcast and other people's works on college radio stations. So it's going to sound compressed, and I'm sorry for that, but I thought I would let you know now. And otherwise, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello to all podcast listeners out there in the world. I am Holden Hacker, and this is the very first installment of CPP, otherwise known as the Crazy Person Podcast. Now, you may be wondering, why the Crazy Person label? Well, that is because on this show, I will be diving headfirst into the often bizarre, conspiratorial, unexplained, and sometimes downright absurd. You will get the usual suspects of the conspiracy theory world. The moon landing was faked, the world is run by reptiles, chemtrails are poisoning us, and yes, even the infamous Finland is not real. However, do not worry. This is not just a parade of half-baked internet nonsense. Sometimes we will dive into conspiracies that are less tinfoil hat and more existentially terrifying. Things like the simulation theory or the dark forest hypothesis, ideas that, frankly, could ruin your ability to enjoy a peaceful nap ever again. When those come up, I will give you a heads up so that those of you who would rather live in blissful ignorance can stay in your happy bubble. Wink, wink. This podcast will be mostly uncensored and primarily a lone wolf endeavor, though on rare occasions I may wrangle in a guest or two. That means you will get a healthy dose of my rambling personality along with the story. I will educate you, but not in the boring, here is your textbook, turn to chapter 5 kind of way. Nope. I will set the stage historically, socially, and politically so you can see not only what happened, but why it mattered to the everyday person. Now, since this is episode 1, I figured we would go big. And I mean big. Today, I will be covering one of the most mysterious, audacious, and enduring unsolved crimes in modern history. a story that blends conspiracy, true crime, aviation history, and a healthy dose of what the hell happened. Ladies, gentlemen, and reptilians tuning in from their government offices. Today I am talking about the one, the only, D.B. Cooper. So strap in your lap belt, secure your tray table, grab that emergency oxygen mask just in case, and let us nosedive straight into the single most incredible aviation mystery of the last 60 years. On a cold, rainy night in late November of 1971, a man boarded a plane in Portland, Oregon. He carried a black attache case, a brief smile, and the most infamous pseudonym not only in the American West Coast, but in American crime, Dan Cooper. Within hours, he would hijack a Boeing 727, demand $200,000 in cash, order 4 parachutes, and then vanish, literally, into thin air. No one knows who he was. No one knows what happened after he leapt into the stormy skies over Washington state. Furthermore, more than 60 years later, the mystery of D.B. Cooper remains one of the greatest unsolved crimes in American history. Now hold on a second. Let us pause here, because I already know what some of you are thinking. Hijacking? Like terrorism? Like September 11th? To that I say, sort of, but not really. The 1970s were the wild, wild west of airline hijackings. And yes, that is a sentence I never thought I would say in my life. Back then, hijacking was not always about killing people and terrorism. Sometimes it was about politics. Sometimes it was about money. Sometimes, frankly, it was just a deranged dude wanting a free trip to Cuba. Seriously, that was a thing. Hijacking planes was essentially a trend that emerged in the late 1960s. So let me set the scene. It is November 24th, 1971, the night before Thanksgiving. Airports across the country are bustling, but the mood is casual, even festive. Airline travel back then was not just common, it was glamorous. Passengers dressed up, men in suits, women in skirts and heels. Smoking on planes was not only allowed, but practically encouraged. Meals were served on real china, accompanied by silverware. Flying was an event, not a chore. Nevertheless, beneath the glamour, the late 1960s through the early 1970s was also an era of turbulence, politically, socially, and economically. The Vietnam War raged on. The counterculture movement clashed with the establishment. Trust in government institutions was crumbling. Furthermore, in the skies above, a strange new phenomenon was unfolding: airline hijackings. When I say hijackings, I do not mean like once in a while. I mean like clockwork. Between 1968 and 1972, there were more than 137 hijackings in the United States alone. That is once every 2 weeks. The United States was not the only victim of air hijackings in any case. Add 168 to that 137, and you get 305 air hijackings worldwide between late 1968 and early 1972, showing how commonplace these incidents were. Imagine turning on the evening news and being like, oh, another plane got hijacked today. What is for dinner? It was insane. Some hijackers demanded asylum in Cuba, as people saw Fidel Castro's communist policies as an antithesis against America's capitalist system, which was opposed for such reasons as the Vietnam War, social inequality, and racism. In fact, a faction of the Red Army faction from Japan was ordered to be taken to Cuba to receive military and ideological training, but had to settle for North Korea as the planes they hijacked could not make the trip due to fuel limitations. Others wanted money as they had the edge over authority figures due to having hostages on the plane. These are all true. I mean, One air hijacker just wanted to see his estranged wife in California. Talk about using Delta Airlines as your personal Uber. So when D.B. Cooper boarded Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 in Portland that evening, he was not stepping into a world where hijackings were unheard of. However, he was about to pull off one that was so stylish, so mysterious, that it would eclipse all the rest. On that evening, a man estimated to be in his mid-40s approached the Northwest Orient Airlines ticket counter. He wore a dark suit, a neat black tie with a mother-of-pearl tie clip, and carried only a briefcase. He purchased a one-way ticket to Seattle on Flight 305. The cost? Just $20. The man gave his name as Dan Cooper. At around 2:50 p.m., passengers began boarding. There were 36 in total, plus a crew of 6. Among them was a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner, who would soon play a central role in the drama. The Boeing 727, the Boeing 727 lifted off at 2:57 p.m. The flight was short, just 30 minutes. However, Cooper had other plans. 10 minutes in, this individual leaned over and handed Florence Schaffner a note. Now, at first, she thought he was just flirting. Like, hey, baby, here's my number. Call me when you get the chance. So she tucked it into her pocket without even looking. That's when Cooper leaned in and dropped the bombshell, literally. He whispered, Miss, you had better look at that note. I have a bomb. Inside the note were his demands, $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting in Seattle to refuel the plane. Calmly, he cracked open his briefcase just enough for Schaffner to see what looked like red sticks of dynamite attached to wires. What is remarkable is how polite Cooper was. Witnesses described him as calm, courteous, and even gentlemanly. He ordered a bourbon and soda, lit a cigarette, and waited as his demands were relayed to the cockpit. Air traffic control contacted Seattle. The airline president quickly agreed to pay the ransom. After all, $200,000 was a small price compared to a plane full of lives. For 2 hours, Flight 305 circled Puget Sound as the FBI and local authorities scrambled to gather the money and parachutes. Passengers, unaware of the complete danger, were told there was a minor mechanical issue. At 5:39 p.m., the plane landed at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. By then, night had fallen, the hijacker ordered the cabin lights be dimmed, and the window shades drawn to hide police activity outside. An airline employee approached with a bag containing the ransom, $200,000 in $20 bills, and 4 parachutes. Once the exchange was complete, Cooper released the passengers and 2 flight attendants. He kept 4 crew members on board. Then he gave his next instructions. Fly south toward Mexico City at 10,000 feet, with the landing gear down and the rear stairway extended. At 7:36 p.m., Flight 305 took off again. Rain lashed the fuselage. Winds battered the wings. Somewhere over southwest Washington at around 8:13 p.m. on November 24th, 1971, the crew in the cockpit of the Northwest Orient Flight 305 felt the plane lurch. The tail dipped, pressure shifted, and a light flicked on in the cockpit, indicating that the rear stairway was down. D.B. Cooper was gone. He had jumped. Parachute strapped to his back, ransom in tow, he leapt into the stormy night, never to be seen again. The crew flying in blind, stormy skies had no idea where exactly the hijacker had leapt. The plane was somewhere over the dense forest and rugged mountains of southwest Washington. By the time the Boeing 727 landed safely back in Reno, Nevada, Cooper was long gone. The FBI launched an investigation immediately, codenaming it Norjack, short for Northwest Hijacking. Now imagine, you are the FBI at this moment. A man has just walked off with $200,000, vanished out the back of a jet, James Bond style, and the entire country is glued to their TVs. You have one job: find this guy. Here's the kicker: they never did. And that is what makes this story so damn wild. The search for Cooper was immediate and intense. Within hours, military aircraft, helicopters, and ground teams were scouring the forest, rivers, and mountains below the flight path. The problem was simple but devastating. Nobody knew exactly where Cooper had jumped. The Boeing 727 had been flying in heavy rain at 200 miles per hour, at an altitude of 10,000 feet. Wind drift, poor visibility, and conflicting reports from the crew made pinpointing a drop zone nearly impossible. Some estimates placed him near the Lewis River. Others suggested further north, around Lake Merwin. The search area spanned miles of rugged wilderness. Despite the weeks of combing the terrain, no trace of Cooper or his parachute were ever found. Here's the thing: if Cooper survived the jump, he had to land in some of the nastiest terrain in the Pacific Northwest. We are talking about pitch black forest, freezing rain, cliffs, rivers, the whole survivalist nightmare package. Remember, it was November. Hypothermia could set in fast. Even Timothy Treadwell would be like, "No thanks, I will just go back to getting eaten alive by a male brown bear than dying in the cold." So did he survive? That is the $6 million question, or rather, the $200,000 question. The ransom itself provided another puzzle. The FBI carefully photographed and recorded the serial numbers of all $10,020 bills. They distributed lists to banks, casinos, racetracks, and businesses across the country. However, for years, not a single bill surfaced. Then, in 1980, a breakthrough. A young boy named Brian Ingram was digging along the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington, when he uncovered 3 bundles of decayed $20 bills. The serial numbers matched the Cooper ransom. The discovery reignited the mystery. How had the money ended up buried miles from the supposed flight path? Had Cooper dropped it? Buried it? Did it wash downstream? The find only deepened the enigma. That little kid finding the money on the riverbank, that is the stuff of legends. Imagine being like, "Hey mom, I found some soggy 20s in the sand," and then realizing you just stumbled into America's greatest unsolved aviation mystery. However, it is also infuriating because it tells us something, but not enough. It was like the universe was saying, "Here's a clue. Do not get cocky." One of the most shocking aspects of the Cooper case is not just the crime itself, but how easily it was pulled off. In 1971, airline security was practically non-existent. Passengers could walk straight to the gate, buy a ticket with cash, and board. No ID required. There were no metal detectors, no bag scanners, no pat-downs. Hijackers routinely smuggled weapons, even explosives, onto planes without challenge. In fact, it was not until 1973, 2 years after Cooper, that the Federal Aviation Administration mandated universal passenger screening. Metal detectors became standard. X-ray machines appeared at airports nationwide. And guess what? Hijackings dropped almost immediately. So basically, D.B. Cooper single-handedly forced America to invent the TSA. For that, I think we all owe him a round of applause, and also maybe a punch in the face, depending on how long you have waited in a security line. Seriously, the fact that a guy could just stroll on with the briefcase bomb and a one-way ticket shows you how laid back air travel used to be. It was like hopping on a Greyhound bus. Over the decades, the FBI investigated more than 800 suspects. Many were quickly ruled out. However, a handful emerged as serious contenders. Let us meet some of the most compelling suspects. Richard Floyd McCoy was a Vietnam veteran and former Army helicopter pilot. McCoy staged a copycat hijacking just months after Cooper's in April 1972. He commandeered a United Airlines 727, demanded $500,000, and parachuted out. Unlike Cooper, McCoy was caught. Authorities found ransom money and parachute gear in his possession. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison, but escaped only to be killed in a shootout with the FBI. Now McCoy looks like the perfect suspect. Vietnam vet? Check. Knows how to jump out of planes? Check. Hijacked the same damn model of airplane? Check. The problem? He did not match Cooper's description, and he had a rock-solid alibi for the night of November 24th. So unless McCoy had a twin brother named Dan with a taste for bourbon and cigarettes, he is probably not our guy. Kenneth Christensen was a former paratrooper and flight attendant for Northwest Orient Airlines. Christensen became a prime suspect decades later. A friend claimed Christensen had confessed on his deathbed, and circumstantial evidence piled up. He matched the physical description, had military training, and worked for the very airline Cooper hijacked. However, the FBI dismissed him. No direct evidence linked Christensen to the crime. Okay, but come on. A guy who literally worked for Northwest Orient and knew the plane inside and out? Moreover, his buddy says he confessed on his deathbed. That is some pretty juicy stuff. If I were writing the Hollywood movie version, Christensen would be my pick. He has got motive, means, and the inside scoop. Apparently, the FBI was not convinced, however. William Gossett was a former military man with survival training. Gossett was another intriguing candidate. He allegedly told his family and friends that he was D.B. Cooper. He even had unexplained wealth in the years following the hijacking. Still, no hard evidence emerged. Robert Rackstraw is perhaps the most infamous suspect. Rackstraw was a former Army pilot and con man with ties to explosives and parachuting. Investigators noted his resemblance to the police sketches. In recent years, documentaries and amateur sleuths have attempted to link Rackstraw to Cooper, pointing to cryptic letters allegedly sent by the hijacker that supposedly contained coded references to Rackstraw's name. Rackstraw himself played coy, never admitting guilt, but never entirely denying it either. He died in 2019. Rackstraw is like the sexy suspect. Every documentary loves him because he looks the part and has that shady con man vibe. But the FBI officially ruled him out in the late 70s. That has not stopped YouTubers from making 2-hour conspiracy videos with titles like D.B. Cooper was totally Robert Rackstraw and here's why the government covered it up. The final major suspect is perhaps my personal favorite and takes us into kooky territory. He is renowned for creating masterpieces such as Big Shark and The Room. Ladies and gentlemen, could Tommy Wiseau actually be the infamous D.B. Cooper? Think about it. Cooper leapt from a plane in 1971 with $200,000 in cash and then simply vanished. Decades later, Tommy Wiseau appeared out of nowhere with a bottomless bank account, a strange accent no one can place, and a refusal to reveal where he is really from. The timelines almost line up. The mystery money could have funded his strange filmmaking ventures. His awkward laugh? Maybe a nervous tell, echoing the thrill of that night. Of course, there is no hard proof. However, with Tommy's secretive past, his eccentric wealth, and his uncanny ability to disappear behind a persona, well, let us just say, oh hi Mark, might really mean, oh hi martial law. There were dozens more. Dwayne Weber, who told his wife on his deathbed that he was Cooper. Sheridan Peterson, a Boeing employee and smoke jumper. Even an Army veteran named John List, who murdered his family and vanished around the same time. Each suspect brought tantalizing possibilities, but none could be definitively proven to be the mysterious hijacker. That is the maddening part. Every time you think, aha, this has to be him, there is some glaring hole in the evidence. Too tall, too short, Wrong age, wrong alibi. It is like the universe does not want anyone to solve it. The FBI chased leads for decades. They examined fingerprints, cigarette butts, and hair samples. They tested the tie Cooper had left behind, hoping to find DNA. They interviewed hundreds of witnesses and tracked ransom bills around the globe. Nevertheless, the case went cold. In 2016, after 45 years, the FBI officially closed the file, admitting that they lacked the resources to continue pursuing a ghost. However, my dear listeners, the legend of D.B. Cooper only grew, and for the remainder of my podcast, I will delve into the most intriguing conspiracy theories of what happened to D.B. Cooper, how Cooper moved into the pop culture spotlight and accrued a cultural legacy overall, and answer/guesstimate the single biggest question in the D.B. Cooper case. Did he live or did he die? The FBI's official position leaned toward death. Their reasoning? Cooper jumped into dangerous conditions, near freezing temperatures, 200-mile-per-hour winds, driving rain, pitch black darkness, and a dense forest. He wore only a suit and loafers, hardly survival gear. On top of that, he selected the dummy parachute, a non-functioning training chute mistakenly included in the set. Was he clueless? Or confident enough not to care? The odds, by all logic, were against him. Here's the thing about odds. They are just numbers. Someone always beats them. If Cooper was ex-military, as many suspect, he might have had the training and guts to pull it off. I mean, people said Evel Knievel shouldn't have survived half the stunts he pulled either, but the guy kept getting up, broken, but alive. So maybe Cooper limped away, buried the chute, and lived quietly ever after. Alternatively, maybe he pancaked into a Douglas fir at 120 miles per hour. Either way, no body, no closure. Where there is mystery, there are conspiracy theories abound, and the Cooper case has more than its fair share. One theory suggests that Cooper was a CIA operative testing a covert parachute escape strategy. After all, the Boeing 727's rear staircase used in the hijacking was later modified with a device called the Cooper vane, which prevented mid-air deployment. Others believe Cooper may have been connected to covert operations in Vietnam, using the hijacking as either practice or punishment against the airline industry. Then there's the theory that the FBI knows far more than they have admitted, that Cooper was identified, perhaps even caught. However, his identity was buried for national security reasons. Oh, here we go, the juicy stuff. I love it when a mystery gets to CIA treatment. Oh, do not mind us, we just let a guy hijack a plane to test a staircase. But hey, do not laugh. The Cold War was a wild time. Governments did insane things in the name of national security. MK Ultra? Operation Northwoods, anyone? Stuff so crazy, it sounds fake. But it was not. So is it possible Cooper was not just some random dude with a death wish, but a cog in a bigger machine? Absolutely. Do we have proof? Nope. But that is how conspiracies thrive, in the cracks where facts run out. Regardless of what really happened, Cooper has become an icon. The story gripped the media immediately. Headlines splash across the front pages. TV anchors obsessed over every lead. Soon, Cooper was not just a fugitive. He was a folk hero. Unlike most hijackers, Cooper was cool, calm, and polite. He did not hurt anyone. He outwitted the system and vanished. In a cynical era of Vietnam and Watergate, Cooper was the anti-hero people weirdly admired. Pop culture embraced him. He appeared in songs, novels, TV shows, and films. From being a main character in the show Prison Break to being theorized to be Don Draper's identity in the show Mad Men. He has also appeared in comic strips like The Far Side and in country music such as The Ghost of D.B. Cooper by Goodnight, Texas. At the end of the day, Cooper's myth is echoed everywhere. There are even annual Cooper-themed festivals in Washington state, complete with skydivers, reenactments, and even Cooper look-alike contests. Think about it. How many criminals get their own fan club? Not Al Capone, not John Dillinger, not even Ted Bundy, unless you count the creepy woman who wrote him letters. But Cooper? He is the outlaw you almost root for. He robbed the system, did not kill anyone, and vanished like a ghost. In a way, he is the ultimate American folk hero, Robin Hood with a parachute. To this day, Cooper's fate remains unknown. No definitive evidence, no confirmed identity, just fragments, a tie, a few bills, a trail that fades into the storm. Every few years, new theories pop up, new suspects emerge. The internet has breathed fresh life into the case, with online sleuths poring over flight maps, weather data, and ransom bill logs. But the truth, it may never be found. And maybe that is the point. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Some legends grow bigger because of the gaps. Cooper did not just hijack a plane. He hijacked our imagination. On November 24th, 1971, a man in a suit and tie boarded a plane and stepped into history. He gave a false name, he ordered a bourbon and soda, and smoked cigarettes. He passed a note, he made demands, and he vanished. What happened afterwards remains one of the greatest riddles of modern times. D.B. Cooper may have died in the woods that night, or he may have lived out his days quietly, watching his own myth grow from the shadows. Either way, the legends live on. So, dear listeners, next time you are in line at the airport, with shoes off, laptop out, and arms up for the scanner, just remember, you can thank D.B. Cooper for all of it. The man who turned air travel from a cocktail party in the sky into a federal security state. But also remember this, sometimes one person can pull off something so bold and mysterious that it outlives them. Cooper may have been a crook, but he is also proof that legends are not born, they are made. And with that, I close the very first episode of the Crazy Person Podcast. If you liked what you heard, stick around, because next time we will delve deep down the rabbit hole of the music industry, which has some of the most plentiful conspiracy theories, aside from perhaps the government, which will have its own episode eventually. Furthermore, I will produce an episode later under the theme of paranormal, which will talk about ghosts, demons, aliens, etc. Until then, keep questioning, keep doubting, and maybe, just maybe, keep an eye on the guy on your flight sitting in seat 18C with a suspicious looking briefcase. Good night, and stay crazy.